Hi, everybody. Welcome back to video 2 in chapter 17. And here we're going to take the next step in allocating overhead costs, this time using activity-based costing. Now, you will see that this is a little bit different than what we just did with the volume-based measures. These are activity-based measures, and we follow 3 steps in doing that. First, we have to go through and identify all the activities and assign costs based on those activity cost pools. So we're dividing that overhead pool into several pieces here. It's still going to be a total of $4.8 million, but this takes a lot more time and effort to do activity-based costing. Then number 2, here we're going to compute an overhead activity rate for each activity cost pool. And then we'll assign overhead costs to our products or cost objects based on those overhead rates. Okay, now graphically, here's our $4.8 million. We have production, setup, design, factory, service. Those represent our activities. And then we assign a logical allocation base for that. For production, we're saying that's direct labor hours. For setups, the cost of each setup. For design, the cost of each design change. And then for our factory services, we just allocate that based on the square footage over which those factory services are rendered. And as you can see by all these arrows, all of those activity costs are then allocated to our standard go-kart and custom go-kart, our 2 cost objects. All right, let's see how we do that. Here in total, we have 4.8 million, but we divided that based on our budget. That's going to be an estimate of 600,000 for production, 2 million for setup, 1.2 million for design, and $1 million for factory services. And we'll allocate that here: direct labor hours, number of setups, number of design changes, and our total square footage of the plant. Okay, so we've identified the individual activities here and we've grouped them into cost pools. The activity cost pool then is a group of costs related to that same activity. And then the activity cost driver is a factor that causes the cost of that activity to go up or down. Now, number 2 here, step 2, we're going to compute the overhead activity rate and for each of those cost pools. So here we've figured out that we've got 75,000 direct labor hours for the standard and 25,000 as we previously calculated, but here we're adding in setups of 40 for the standard and 160 for the custom. And the design changes, there's no design changes for the standard model and 10 for the custom model. And so our square footage used by the standard model is 12,000 square feet, and the custom model is 8,000, total of 20,000. So now we simply take those budgeted costs that we calculated previously and divide them through by the total. Notice this is the total over here that we're bringing down, and we calculate an activity rate. Okay, and then we're going to apply those activity rates individually to the products. So don't get confused on that. It's a place where new students often don't use the total activity usage in calculating the activity rate. Okay, for step 3, then we'll allocate the cost of the cost objects. Here we have our standard go-kart, and we have 75,000 direct labor hours. We've calculated that $6 per direct labor hour, and we calculate the allocated costs. We do that for each of those activities. And we come up with $1.45 million of allocated cost for the standard go-kart. We divide that through by the total units produced, which was 5,000, you'll remember, and that comes out $290 of overhead cost per unit. On the custom go-kart, quite a bit of difference in allocated cost. Again, if I take the 3,350,000 plus the 1,450,000, we'll come back to the 4.8 million in total. But here we're going to take that $3.35 million for the custom go-kart and divide it through by the 1,000 units, and we get quite a dramatic $3,350 per custom go-kart of allocated overhead. So now, if I apply that through, here we go. Here's our 4.8 million, and here's our total of 4.8 million. And like we did before, our direct materials and direct labor did not change, but quite a bit of difference here in the amount of overhead that we charge to our product costs. So in total, using activity-based costing, we get $1,040 of product cost per unit for the standard go-kart, but $4,450 for the custom go-kart. Quite a little bit of difference. So what does that mean? If you look at these comparisons here, there's quite a little bit of difference, particularly in activity-based costing, in what we're going to allocate to the custom go-kart versus the standard go-kart. So I think as you read through these, the overhead cost allocated to the custom model is higher under activity-based costing because the custom models suck up more activities that drive overhead, while the ABC emphasizes activities under number 2 here, and their cost better reflects how overhead costs are used. Under 3, the plant-wide and departmental rates methods do not capture the product's different use of activities and can, and in this example, do distort the overhead cost allocations. Though, and this is kind of an important point here, low volume, complex products are undercosted, right? And high volume, simpler products are overcosted when we use the plant-wide and departmental rate. Key concept there. Okay, so if I look now at the pricing compared to my costs, this is quite an eye-opening exercise here. The product cost, unit cost, is lower for standard go-kart versus the custom, so I'm making more money using activity-based costing than I would with a plant-wide, or for that matter, departmental rate. As you see here, our gross profit is higher now, dramatically higher for the standard go-kart, whereas the custom go-kart, we're selling the little beauty for $3,500, but it's costing us $4,450. We're losing $950 per unit in gross profit. Big numbers. So that's important costs to understand. The plant-wide rate and the custom rate. Now, some of this may be fixed costs, which wouldn't go away if we eliminated the custom go-kart, but we'd have to do an in-depth analysis to figure that out. So more accurate overhead allocation leads to better product pricing and better product mix decisions, as would be shown here. We may have to price this custom go-kart up by another $1,000 or something like that. All right. What are the 4 types of activities that cause overhead costs? We have some that are at the unit level, some that are at the batch level, some that are performed on the product line, and some that are performed at the facility level as a whole. Let's look at that in a little more depth. Here, unit level, that's going to be pretty easy. We're cutting parts, we're assembling components. Our activity drivers can be machine hours or direct labor hours. That's pretty clear. Batch level, though, that's a little more complicated. We're setting up machines, receiving shipments, sampling product quality, maybe even recycling hazard waste. And we could have a cost driver for each one of those. Product level, now there we're talking about our designs and maybe how we control inventory. We could have our activity driver be the change request or the parts per product. And then our facility level, we have, we're going to clean the factory, and usually that's pretty proportional to square footage. We'll provide electricity and other utilities. We can allocate that based on kilowatt hours maybe, or therms for gas and other ways. And then we reduce gas emissions by the tons of CO2 that are emitted. So we can get real carried away with activity drivers if it's worthwhile for us to dig into our costs to that level of detail. Okay, so now we're going to allocate overhead costs to the service companies. And I think that's probably a good place for us to stop this video. And when we come back, we'll finish off chapter 17. Until that time, bye for now.